All right, guys, so going into chapter 2, okay, and this is probably a lesson that you have seen in elementary school, but what we're going to do is we're going to start extremely basic, and this is just finding a percent of a number, okay? So that is if you have, $120, okay? I'll give you an easy one, right? What is 50% of the $120? Okay, and a lot of us know what 50% is, and we can find that out mentally. All right. However, that's extremely easy. But those are the kind of problems we're going to be doing just for today. All right, and they'll slowly get more challenging, and I'm going to show you different ways to solve these. But what I want to do is I just want to introduce what percent actually means. So, and we talked about this briefly before, but we have the word percent. I want to break this up into two parts, okay, and the word per and the word cent, okay? So if we talk about that word in general, the whole word, and this is going to help you remember some things, especially in future lessons. We've talked about this, considering that we've talked about unit rates. What is per? Who could tell me like a synonym for per? And there could be more than one, okay? For what? Okay.
Each.
Each. Okay. We talk about being each. What else?
Every.
Okay. For every. Okay. How about, each is, we always called it each, which is kind of a synonym for each, right? Is one, for one. Okay. How about cent? The root word cent, it comes in a lot of different words, all right? Something like, it comes in a word like century, centipede, okay, actually, right? Talking about money. You can even think of the actual word, cent, okay? Those are just examples of words that have that root word, but what does cent, what's the meaning behind cent? Yeah, so 100 or sometimes 100. Like you talk about a cent, that is 1/100th of a dollar. Okay, is a cent. Talk about century, that's 100 years. Centipede, right? It's talking about a particular animal that appears to have 100 legs, right? So we're talking about cent being 100. Now, here's what this means. Percent of a number means out of each 100. Okay, out of each 100. So if you have $100 and I said, guys, what is 5% of $100? You would say it's $5. If it's, what is 78%? Give me 78% of your $100 there. You'd say, oh, you're going to give me $78. It's out of 100. But what happens is, it's not always out of 100. Okay, so let's say I have, if I have 25% of 100 is $25, but it's for each 100. What if I have $200? What's 25%? Well, if for the first 100, if I have 25 out of 100, it's 25. What about the second 100, right? Because it's a total of 200. 25 and another 25 is how much? $50. So 25% of 200 is $50. Okay, so that's because it's out of 100, not out of 200. Okay. Now we'll get more into this as the chapter goes on, but I want to talk about just today finding out what, mathematically, how do you find out what a percentage of a number is? All right. So let's go ahead and let's take our book and let's flip over to page 106. On 106, it says find each number, round to the nearest tenth if necessary. All right. So your problem for number one there, and we're going to write some steps down here, is 8% of 50. They want to know, what is 8% of 50? So if something was $50 and you were going to save 8% of the money for $50, how much would you be saving? That's what it is. So here's what we do. All right? And this might look familiar from elementary school. Step one is you're going to take this and you're going to convert it either to a decimal or fraction. Converting that to a decimal or fraction. Now listen, we have this little thing called a calculator. So in this case, I could put it, because it's out of 100, 8 over 100. or change it to a decimal because we have the calculator. That's the route I'm going right now, and that is I'm going to move it over 2 times to the left and have 0.08, which is, the way you say that is 8 hundredths. Now, step 2 is, remember, what we're actually doing is we're doing a problem that is part of a whole, and we've talked about this with multiplication problems. We're going to change the word of to multiplication. Multiplication word problems, right? It's part of a whole is multiplication. Okay? And of course, I'll bring my 50 down. Now, step 3 on this particular problem, I'm going to go ahead and punch it in my calculator. 0.08 times 50 equals, ladies and gentlemen, 8% of 50 is 4. Okay? Questions on that one? Okay, let's do one more together. All right, let's take a look at 107, problem number, and actually it's on 108, I believe, problem 13. So this is more of a 7th grade kind of problem that we're about to do. And here it is. Number 13 says, what is 4/5 of a percent of 500? So it's less than 1% of 500. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. We have 2 options. Okay? And we're going to call this step star. Okay? And because we can, after we do step star, we can just follow our major 3 steps and it's the same exact problem. Here's the only bonus here. We're going to take this and we're going to convert this to a decimal, or we can convert it to a complex fraction, ultimately a complex fraction. So 4/5 percent, right? We would just do step 1 and change 4/5 over 100. Okay? I'm going to convert this to a decimal. So here we go. Step 1, 4/5 is a decimal. If you don't remember, it's bottom into top. Okay? If you're using a calculator, however, you're going to say 4 divided by 5 in the calculator. 4 divided by 5. And I get 0.8. Now listen, that is not step 1. I am not changing, I'm not scooting this over. Meaning I'm just converting the decimal, the fraction to a decimal. My percentage is still there. 4/5 percent is the same as 0.8%. So now I have 0.8% of 500. And now we do step 1, 2, and 3. So step 1, I'm now converting. This I just converted the fraction to a decimal, but it's still in percent form. This one I'm converting the percent form, the whole thing, to a decimal by doing the same thing I did here. Remember, we moved the decimal over twice. What we're really doing is dividing by 100. So 1, 2. So I end up with a decimal point, 0.008. I'm not putting my percent sign. I just converted the decimal form to, the percent form to a decimal form. All I was doing right on this one is converting my fraction, where I can move the decimal over, I was converting that fraction to a decimal form. Okay? Not solving the problem at all. I'm just making it that way where we can then actually do step 1. So I then converted the percent to a decimal. Step 2, remember it's part of a whole, so it's times 500. And then step 3 is I'm solving. So 0.008 times 500 equals, coincidentally, this is also 4. Okay, guys, questions on that one? Okay, here's the one I want you guys to try out. Problem number 6, and that one is back on page 107. Problem number 6. All right, I'll give you 30 seconds. Go. Okay, 30 seconds. Turn to your neighbor and share. Go.
I just got 128.
Okay, here we go. Problem number 6 was 150% of 128. So step 1 is, if this was a fraction, I'd do step star, right? That's not a fraction. Don't need to worry about it. So step 1 is, if it's this percent, I'm going to go ahead and change it into decimal form by moving the decimal over twice. I'm dividing by 100. I never said to move it clear to the front. Some people may have concluded that by saying, oh, I never said that. Move the decimal twice, which means 1/2 gives us 1.50. Of is times 128, and I go ahead and 128 times 1.5 equals 192. You go, well, Mr. Wilkins, how did 128 get bigger? Well, it's because it's 150%. 100% of 128 is 128. It's actually more than what you started with because it's 150%. So it's 192. Okay, questions on that one? Okay, let's take a look at problem number 10. Problem number 10. Okay, problem number 10 says, let's close read this. Suppose there are 20
Questions.
Let's try it one more time. We're on number 10. Suppose there are 20 questions on a multiple
Choice.
test. If 25% of the answers are choice B, how many of the answers are choice B? Ooh, all right. So, listen carefully. They want to know, we can find out what 25% of 20 is, but that's going to tell me how many are choice B. But what's the question asking? How many are not choice B? So if 25% of them are choice B, what's the percentage that are not choice B, guys? What's the percent? 75%, right? Because 25 plus 75 is 100. It's all of them, 100%. So if this is choice B, this one is not choice B. It's 75% of them. So 75% of 20. And at this point, guys, we're finding out what is 25% of the 75% of the 20 problems. So I'm going to go through my steps. Move the decimal over twice. So I have 0.75 times 20. And so we have 0.75 times 20 equals 15. It is a word problem. So how many of the answers are not choice B? 15 of the answers. Or you could even say 15 of the problems, which would be pretty much the same. Okay? It's just percentage of a number, even on the word problems. All right, percentage of a number.